flexibility and performance. I want you to think of your body as a bicycle wheel, and every muscle in your body would be a spoke on that wheel. The question is it possible to have too much tightness in your body or not enough tightness in your body to hinder your performance while you're working out and doing different lifts? So if we go back to the bicycle wheel analogy, on a bicycle wheel, you have all these different spokes that run out in different directions from the center of the hub. So think of your body as the same thing. You've got the center of your body, or the center of the wheel, and then all of our muscles running in different directions would be the spokes on the wheel. And if we crank down those spokes and they're too tight, then the wheel becomes stiff and it won't roll properly. And if the spokes are too loose, the wheel becomes wobbly, and anytime it hits a pothole or a bump in the road, that energy cannot be dissipated evenly throughout the wheel, and you get this imbalance in movement. So think of your body the same way. If we start in the middle and we look down at our legs and our arms and we start cranking the muscles too tight, it's going to pull the body out of proper alignment, and your body's not going to move properly. If the muscles in our body are too long or too loose, like wobbly spokes on a wheel, our body is also not going to move properly. So some of the things that can affect would be an overhead press. So as we press up overhead, as we tighten up, you're going to see the body going forward so that the press looks like this. Or you might see a press up and you'll see the body go this way, like that. On a deadlift position, if the muscles in the back of your legs are too tight, you're going to see the body, as it bends forward, instead of it being able to go into extension through here like this, from this knee to my hip, this distance right here, if it's too tight, you're going to see my pelvis tuck under like that. So on a deadlift, I'm going to be in this position, kind of a rounded back posture, as opposed to being able to go into extension like that. Same thing on a bent over row. If you're too tight in the hamstrings and you go to bend forward like this, the pelvis is going to start to tuck under, your back's going to round, and you see this rowing position that looks kind of like that, as opposed to being in the proper position. So there is a proper length and tension relationship between your muscles and your joints, meaning if the muscle's at the right length, it'll have the right tension in it to allow movement to occur naturally in the right position. If it's not at the right length and it's too short, then joints start to get pulled out of position and you see faulty movement patterns. Think of your body and think of the muscular system as a sail. So if this is the mast on a sail, and then you've got the guide wires coming up like this off the sides, if these big muscles or these big guide wires get too strong and the mast in the middle becomes weak, it starts to get pulled all around like this. But the same thing can happen with muscles being too tight. If this side over here is too tight and I start cranking down on it, it's going to pull that center or the mast this way. Well, this is the same as your spine. So if I have my spine like this, and I start cranking all these muscles on this side too tight, it's going to pull me over like this. I'm out of balance. So I need to have both sides, this side, front to back. Everything needs to be in balance and at the right tension so that everything works the way it should. If you are a runner and your hamstrings are too long or too flexible, we see a lot of folks that do a lot of stretching and they become too flexible. So the hamstrings are so long that you can see somebody touch their palms flat to the floor. Well, what happens in that case is when you're coming through your swing phase on your walk and your foot's coming from here and it's coming through before it strikes the ground, that hamstring should have tension on it so that when it hits the ground, when your heel strikes the ground, it can dissipate the energy through your body and you can go through this side. If it's too long, that doesn't happen. There's nothing to stabilize that foot when it hits the ground. It just hits the ground and everything's wobbling. So there is a case that can be made for muscles being too flexible. More flexibility is not always better. Just enough flexibility is what you want. So when you're stretching out at the end of a workout, if you go into a stretch, let's say it's a hip flexor stretch and you're like this, and you drop into it and you feel really tight on this side, stretch it out. If I switch over to this side and I don't feel anything, or I feel like it's not quite as tight, or maybe a lot less tight, I don't need to stretch that side near as much. So when you're doing your stretches, think balance. If one side's tight, stretch it. If the other side's not quite as tight, leave it alone. That's how you're going to create balance in your body, make your workouts a lot more effective, more fun, and reduce your chances of injury.